and I saw the logo that the abolitionists had on like a coin, and it had a picture of an African American man in chains, and he was like pleading, and it's around the coin. It said, "Am I not a friend and a brother?" And I thought to myself, like these people, abolitionists, like stood up. They believed in something bigger than themselves, and they went down in history fighting for what's right. And I saw what was happening to kids, and then I saw kids show up in my life, and I saw how innocent and malleable and just beautiful that they are. And I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm making a stand on this. Like people are going to know me for a couple things. They're going to know me for having curly hair, for being a crypto guy, and for this gender stuff.
Hello, everybody. You are listening to Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. And before we jump into the episode, I'm going to kindly remind you to hit that like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching. It helps the podcast grow with visibility, feeds the algorithm. It is a giant machine, and we are just trying to grow, and I cannot do it without you. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out the links below. We have affiliates, sponsors, and you can also buy me a nice warm cup of coffee. It's a beautiful fall day. I know it's not fall yet, but it certainly feels like it. All of the resources go right back into the podcasting, into editing, getting in-person guests, all of that. So I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much in advance. This week, we have Nick Dimondi joining the podcast. Nick is head of content at Hit Network. He's also a screenwriter. We met on Around the Blockchain, which is one of their channels over at the Hit Network. And this conversation is amazing. We get into so many topics. We start out off with Bitcoin, blockchain. What is that? So you do not need to be an expert to appreciate this conversation. And the bigger reason why it's important to maybe start learning about these alternative forms of currency. We get into politics, we get into Russell Brand, and we even get into some gender ideology, and it's all kind of looped together. And it might seem like a very messy puzzle, but I promise it all connects at the end. So without further ado, please help me welcome Nick Dimondi. Nick, welcome to the podcast. It's very nice to have you.
It is so good to be here, Candace. Good to see you.
I was checking Twitter, and I'm trying to keep up with like all of the Russell Brand stuff, I think, right now, like
Oh
everyone
my
else is.
gosh.
And it seems maybe a little bit unrelated to some of the listeners, but I promise you it's all going to tie in beautifully together. And I was like, wow, the timing of this, I think, is really paramount, especially after the British Parliament letter got released that they were
Mm-hmm.
sending around to different social platforms. So I kind of want to start with the topic about Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency, because
Mm-hmm.
even though it's been around for a while now, I think it still makes people dizzy when they
It
try
does.
to think about it. So,
Yep.
as simply as you can we kind of get into what is the foundation of blockchain technology?
So it's funny how there's like the intellectual dark web, and Russell Brand is part of that. They've
Mhm.
all gravitated to Bitcoin because of its ability to not be censored. So essentially, the backbone of Bitcoin is blockchain. And you could just think of blockchain like a gigantic CVS receipt, has all the different transactions that has ever happened at that CVS, but it cannot be changed and it cannot be reversed. And anyone who's spending money at that CVS can't spend the same Bitcoin money twice. How that comes together is basically through physics. There's just a bunch of math equations that are done on a bunch of computer problems that verify this gigantic CVS receipt that all of these different people, all these different computers have, and they all have to check it every 10 minutes and say, hey, is your receipt the same as my receipt? And if the majority says yes, then we say, okay, so that's now a block that's on the chain. Let's make a new block. Let's gather in all these transactions and put on this giant CVS receipt. I'll check it. Are we all good? Are we all good? Yep. Okay. Cool. Next block. That's it's just one giant spreadsheet. But the beauty of it is it's not centralized. Everyone there's like literally tens of thousands of computers that we call miners that are doing the math to make sure that this one gigantic spreadsheet or CVS receipt is the same at all times. The reason that it can't be overturned has to do with the amount of people that are on the network all saying yes. improves what they call the hash rate or the difficulty, and that makes it to where trying to overturn a transaction, you would have to overpower all the tens of thousands of people on the network just to change one little piece of it. So it's just incredibly what we call hard money. Like gold, you can't mess around with because you either have the gold or you don't. And the Bitcoin, you can't mess around with because you either have the Bitcoin or you don't, and you can't fake it. It's not like some guy at Bank of America or like some guy named Sam Bankman-Fried at FTX who has access to, you know, it's centralized money. And so really the only money exists on paper, right?
Mhm.
And so if the money only exists on paper in the spreadsheet that they have control to and they are not checking it with anyone else, they can just go boop, change some numbers, and then everyone's money's gone. That literally is not physically possible. I'm not saying digitally possible. It's not physically possible on Bitcoin to do that. So that is basically what Bitcoin is and what blockchain is in, I don't know, 2 minutes.
Yeah, and I guess that the difference between that too is there's a finite amount of it, where with a lot of these altcoins, you can kind of continue to increase the supply similar to how we print, our currency, like the USD or whatever currency you're using around the globe. So with Bitcoin, it's fixed. Everything else can kind of be adjusted, and then that can skew the value of it as well.
Sure. I mean, so there's you just went another level up on like the characteristics of blockchain. One of the things that makes Bitcoin special, in addition to how it's what they call consensus, basically everyone agreeing
Hmm.
that the receipt is right. Its consensus makes it special, and its capped supply makes it special. So there's 21 million Bitcoin that will only ever be minted, but one Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million what's called satoshis.
Hmm.
So you're like, oh wow, Bitcoin's $26,000. I can't afford that. Well, wrong. You can
Hmm.
buy $50 worth of Bitcoin, which is, I don't know, 50,000 Satoshis or something like that. So, but yeah, it's great because it's hard money. It can't be inflated away. So just like there are, uh, you know, commodity items like tissues don't have a lot of value because there's a gazillion of them and they just are continuously being made. Just like the dollar in 1971, when it came off the gold standard, has lost 96% of its purchasing power. And that's
Hmm.
only going to continue. It can drop another 96%, I promise. There
You
is
know
no
what's in
zero.
You know, it's interesting you say that, and I was watching a Michael Saylor video earlier today, and he was explaining how so we have this idea, I think a lot of people that haven't made the jump into investing into any kind of cryptocurrency or,
Mhm,
they haven't done a lot of their own research, they really just see these really big market swings with Bitcoin specifically and
mhm.
maybe Ethereum, like the more popular ones, and they're like, "Whoa, that looks way too risky for me. I would rather have my money in my bank account where I see the same dollar amount," right? Like you don't see the swing, but he was talking about the depreciation of the dollar, and he was actually comparing it to the peso. So he
Yeah.
was saying where a peso will lose over 90% of its value in about 20 years,
Mhm,
that the US dollar will lose over 90% of its value in 90 years. And
mhm.
it seems like a long time, right? Like that's more than the average life span, but if you're trying to work your life to create legacy for your children, provide to your community, whatever it is that you're building, it's not going to live much longer than you do, if at all. So he used his Miami house as an example, and he said in the 19 I want to say 1930s, he said it was, worth maybe $100,000 or something
Mhm,
like that, very reasonable. And then now it's worth $42 million. So he's like, you
mhm.
do the math,
Yeah.
and it's projected to go to 100 million. So it just we have a very disillusioned idea that the dollar really holds on to its value, and we think that Bitcoin doesn't because of the swings. It's just you're not seeing
No.
your dollar tank. It shows up in ways like inflation, cost of goods sold, all of that. So it's a little bit trickier and for much more intelligent people than myself to break down to a granular level. But it's like nothing is without risk. And in my opinion, it's a lot better to invest your money than to keep it into a bank account.
Yeah, it's inflation is stealth taxation. The other thing I would add to Saylor's great breakdown of that is not only is it going to take 90 years for the dollar to lose 90% of its purchasing power, but you are losing out on the cost of goods. You're also losing out on lost wages. So it's not like your wages
Mm,
are going in the opposite direction and going up. News flash, they're flat and they have been flat for 30 years. They are not keeping pace with inflation. So inflation's going up, but your wages are not also going up. They're like this. So you're
hmm.
losing out on both ends of the stick at that point. I kind of got like black pilled on money in 2020, as along with a lot of other people, while taking the orange pill at the same time. But I heard someone on Clubhouse. You remember Clubhouse?
Yeah.
Back before Clubhouse was like an absolute insane asylum. It was actually great in 2020. But someone on Clubhouse said dollars are only for spending, and I was like, holy crap! Wait, yeah, because rich people don't just hold dollars. If they're actually going to like put dollars into an account, it's to spend them. Other than that, it is in some type of, it's either a mutual fund or a piece of property getting some type of return because they understand the situation that they're in,
Mhm.
which is this is not just losing 7% a year. Other things are going up by 12%. Like, I don't know if you've seen like the inflation numbers out, but they're saying, oh man, inflation's under control. This is the best. Inflation's slowing down. Well, newsflash, it's actually going down because of the price of gas is fluctuating so much. If you
Mm.
take out gas from the equation and you look at shelter and food, it's been double digit basically for the past 2 years. It's not slowing down. So not only is your food more expensive, but 80% of all the dollars that are in circulation have been printed in the last 3 years. So you're getting,
Mm.
yeah, you're getting it from all sides, and it's not consensual. So you didn't
No,
vote
it's
for it.
certainly not.
You didn't vote
It
for it.
seems like one of the only areas that consent is not even a topic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taxes, inflation. For me, I'm very fortunate that I live in a place where I don't know the price of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something that I really look at,
Mhm.
but I will say I've been noticing food a lot.
Mhm.
And I go to the grocery store or we go out to, like, even breakfast, and then breakfast the other day cost us $72 for, 3 people,
Yeah.
and one of them was a child.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Whoa, I'm noticing this. This is crazy. This is for a
Mhm.
plate of eggs and a couple coffees. This is nuts." So, yeah, I'm like, I don't know what the average person is doing right now, but it's really painful out there. So it's like, how do you hedge that bet? I wanna go back to Bitcoin.
Okay.
So and we you mentioned consensus.
Mhm.
So when it comes to all of these computers agreeing, like, this is a valid transaction, this is a
Mhm.
valid update, what happens when you have, like, these really big institutions that are now coming in and scooping up so much Bitcoin? Does that make it more vulnerable to corruption, to
Mm.
censorship, to kind of like a false agreed upon update, whatever it is? Like, it's not accurately representing the people anymore?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. It's actually something that people in crypto are kind of coming to grips with right now. It's like, okay, BlackRock
Mhm,
just opened up the taps on their Bitcoin fund and they're trying to get a spot ETF, exchange traded fund for Bitcoin. What does that mean? BlackRock is, I think, the second biggest asset under management firm on the planet. They have more money than the United States. So a lot of the Bitcoin that's out there right now is paper Bitcoin. It's fake. It's not there. So it's all on an exchange, a centralized exchange saying, yeah, we have this Bitcoin, blah, 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 blah. No one's taking their Bitcoin out of those exchanges. Well, they are, but they're not doing it fast enough.
mhm,
So what everyone's kind of figuring out right now, and shout out to Willie Woo. He was actually just talking about this on Peter McCormick's What Bitcoin Did podcast. Willie Woo said, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen because there's so much paper Bitcoin wrapped up in leverage trading that the institutions are trading back and forth, but they're not actually turning that into like Bitcoin on the blockchain. They're just going to Coinbase, they're going to Binance and saying, yeah, I'm buying all this Bitcoin and it's on paper and they're not settling it out, right?
mhm, mhm,
What's going to happen then? Well, what's going to happen then is two things. Number one, there's going to be a massive upward price action as people start to take their Bitcoin off of the exchanges because the amount of Bitcoin that's available to trade is going to go down. And then next year in March, we have the Bitcoin halving. So the third beautiful thing about Bitcoin is there's a certain amount of Bitcoin for every block is released back out into the wild. That's how we get more Bitcoin, but there is a cap. But every 4 years, that emission rate per block is cut in half. It started at 50, and now it's at, I think, three and a quarter. Or now it's at six and a quarter, and then it's going to drop in March. It's going to be cut in half to, I think, 3.14 Bitcoin per block. So the supply of Bitcoin is being cut in half every 4 years. Institutions have only started buying over the past two. What's going to happen when there's an asset that everyone wants that suddenly becomes scarce? What happens? Price go up. Consensus, thankfully, doesn't have much to do with people buying and selling Bitcoin because the consensus is going to happen no matter what. There's just going to be more transactions for each block, and so the block time will mean the same, but your transactions may be slowed down. I don't think that's actually going to be a big deal as far as them corrupting consensus until I saw BlackRock doing what BlackRock does best, which is buying a voting share in publicly traded companies in order to change how they are run. That's how BlackRock is in control of most of the things on this planet. They're starting to do that with publicly traded Bitcoin miners. Off the top of my head, Riot and I think Hut 8 are publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies that BlackRock has purchased, I think, at least a 10% stake in. What that means is they are now voting on things, and they are using their weight, their 10% stake, to influence how people vote and how the company does things. So there is a small contingent of idiots that want to change the Bitcoin code so that is no longer math based, but it's like this thing called proof of stake, which is kind of a scam depending on how you implement it, but it does use less power, but it's centralized. So it's very easy. Proof of stake is centralized. So it completely ruins the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. They may try and change that, although I don't think they would, because that would ruin the fundamental value proposition of Bitcoin. So as far as institutions buying, they can manipulate the price up and down to a point, but I don't think they can manipulate the actual behavior of Bitcoin and making as far as like what makes it special.
Is there a way for the government to make it illegal?
Uh, Bitcoin cannot be stopped as far as the network goes. You could really access Bitcoin over a ham radio if you had to. They can make it difficult for you to hold it. They can track because it's on the public block. It's a public ledger. That's what a blockchain is. So it's public. Everyone can see the transactions, but the wallets are anonymous. But
Mhm.
if they can basically track your wallet, it's coming to an IP address. They kind of know where you live, and they can also just tell all the internet service providers, hey, just the Bitcoin network, just don't allow access to it. Well, there's this thing called the deep web. So there's plenty of other ways to get around ISPs, but they can extremely hamper your access to Bitcoin temporarily. So there will people will find ways to work around it, especially if we're in some kind of scenario where, you know, a loaf of bread is $500 and people are just kind of using Bitcoin on the gray market. People will find a way to trade Bitcoin.
Mhm. And what would you say, like, the main differences, and I know that there's a lot, but I think, it gets confusing, the main differences between something like Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah. So uh, other smart people have said this before. So this isn't my take, but Bitcoin is digital gold. It's a store of value. It's an asset. Whereas Ethereum is digital oil. It's something that's to be used and burnt. So Ethereum is going to be the thing that we use to make more things digital and back up things digitally, like driver's licenses and property deeds and marriage licenses and what have you. Because again, if it's going on a blockchain, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to corrupt that data. So, like for instance, in Missouri, there's a small town in Missouri. A tornado went through the town, basically sucked up the entire town and threw it out the top, and there was nothing left, including the records office. The records office was all paper based. Now, no one knows who owns what property there in, I think it's Joplin, Missouri. But if that was put on the blockchain, even if those computers were just obliterated, you could just access back, you could log back into the Ethereum blockchain and pull up all the records for all those people's houses and businesses and what have you. So that's an extremely powerful use case for Ethereum and other chains like Cardano. And so that's like one of the great ways that Bitcoin is and blockchain is really going to revolutionize things is people are going to be using things like Ethereum for like everyday activities, like tickets to like Braves games or whatever. But Bitcoin is going to be the thing that you're going to use to like shield yourself from everybody manipulating the dollar.
So when it comes to keeping it, storing it, where you're trading it, I think a lot of the world was paying attention with FTX.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of implosions at that time. Celsius went down. And the thing with, I guess, the comparing of or bringing them up in the same sentence, I think they're two very different men. I had Alex Mashinsky on the podcast
Mm.
months before everything happened. My husband's met him in person a few times at some events, and I can't, and maybe this is my own error, but I can't see him as like a bad guy. Like I don't. he just seems like so anti-authority, big whatever, right? Big
Mhm.
banks essentially. And what I see with Mashinsky is that he was going toe to toe with banksters and they kind of took him down in some way. Or maybe he just was over leveraged. I don't know. It doesn't feel the same way as FTX. Now,
Mhm.
taking both of their characters outside of it, like, how do you know where you're putting your money is a legitimate place, or are you just a fan of holding on to it, like, own your keys, own your wallet kind of a thing? Because that also seems like it's obviously not risk-free either, right? You
Mhm.
forget your password, it's gone forever. So, like, what is
Mhm.
the answer to that?
Um, I'm a big proponent of self sovereignty. I'm
Mhm.
going to be more on the self sovereignty camp, but I know that's not for everyone. Like
Right.
the idea of buying $80,000 worth of ones and zeros, and then you have 12 words that can unlock that $80,000 of ones and zeros that you can't physically touch. And if you lose or forget those 12 words, all that $80,000 is gone forever. That's terrifying to some people. And I understand, my heart goes out to people who are terrified of that. At the same token, you can have a bunch of fat cats in Wall Street, i.e., Washington, because it's one and the same, who are just playing around and playing games with your money, with your retirement, with your little nest egg or whatever for your kids. And they'll go in and leverage that and it will just go away. And it's like, oopsie poopsie.
Mhm.
Notice who got bailed out. It was the banks. No one's
Mhm.
retirement fund got backfilled, right? No
Mm.
one got their house that was foreclosed on returned back from them back in 2008. None of that happened. Okay.
Mhm.
The fat cats looked out for themselves. So there is risk no matter what. What is your
Mhm.
risk tolerance? I think it's too risky to not have some exposure to Bitcoin. You can have it on a centralized exchange like Celsius or FTX, or you can own it yourself, which has risk. There's ways to get around that. But going back to your point about Mashinsky and FTX and Celsius, I know a lot about what happened with Alex. I know a lot. And I know a lot about what happened with FTX. In both of those instances, neither one of those guys are evil. There are people in the space that are evil, but neither one of those guys I would say are evil, but both of them were enticed by power, and power corrupts. And Mashinsky doesn't like the establishment. He still doesn't, but he liked his establishment. He wasn't
Mm.
giving up control of his crypto. He wasn't letting people have oversight of how he was investing. And so then he got over leveraged, and he was just listening to the wrong people, and he wasn't listening to criticism. And Sam Bankman Fried, I think, fundamentally is mentally ill and is a savant and is really good at some stuff, but he's not a crypto guy. And so he's a finance bro. Like, let's just be perfectly clear. And a terrible League of Legends player. He only got to like bronze status. I don't know what that means. I don't have time for games anymore. But he just got a lot of money and got a lot of drugs and started getting a lot of sex. And at that point, like the script, we've read that script 1,000 times.
Mhm.
I'm not some type of superhero. Would the same thing happen to me? Probably. If I had all that money, the guy had billions of dollars just on tap, and he could do whatever he wanted. I mean, I'm no better than him, but at least I didn't do it. So we're all susceptible to it. He just thought he could. He just thought he couldn't be touched, right? And like that's when you've screwed up, is when you think you can't be touched. So,
Mhm.
what about you? Like, what's your risk tolerance? Like, where are you at on the spectrum of self sovereignty and custodianship?
I like both. I like mixing it up.
Hmm.
So we have some that is on more of a centralized network, and then we also do have some that's cold storage. And I think
Hmm.
for that, I think it's important to have some, even if you are like terrified of holding your own keys. I think it's important to at least have some that if like shit goes down, you go into the safe, you grab your whatever storage unit you're using, and you hit the road, whatever it is, right? And you see
Yeah.
this in some war torn countries where you definitely don't want to be holding on to gold bars or cash
Hmm.
because that's going to get
Hmm.
taken from you from somebody. If you have something that's a little bit more discreet, I think that's easier to travel with. And you're not going to be like you're not going to potentially have time to do a transfer. So you want to have something that's cold storage just for like in case of emergency, pull this lever. And then also it's just again like risk tolerance. So if I suck at one of them, hopefully the other one is easier to access. So I
Yeah.
think diversifying is usually the answer, right? Don't go all in on
Hmm.
one bet.
You seem to have thought this through a lot. Are you like a Sarah Connor? Do you think about these end of times things a lot?
End of times? For
Yeah.
sure, yeah. I mean, so I was raised by a cop dad, and I've got 2 small kids. I really enjoy, and I don't know why, maybe, like, I'm a little bit of a masochist, but I love getting into culture and politics and
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
going on a ground level. So it's like you can't see all of this and then be raised the way that I was and not have like a little bit of caution or like have a little bit of need
Mhm.
for being prepared, not paranoid, but just prepared. So like we've got a go bag, I've got food, I've got water, like
Do
we've
you
got a
really?
plan.
You
Yeah.
got a go bag?
I
Oh
got
my
a go
god.
bag and it
That's
is
awesome.
stocked.
Candace, that's a business opportunity. Go bags by Candace. Like you're printing money.
Just curated with
Yeah.
everything. I've got, like, my Afghani bandages, and I've got Quick Clot, and I've got my Life straws, I've got the
Wow.
Life tent, flares, you name it. It's ready to go. We've got
Amazing.
our
I
mats.
I I will buy one. You send me the Amazon cart, I will buy it from you. You can get 10% on top. I need it.
Oh my god, it'd probably be embarrassing with how much it costs to, like, fully do a bag, but it's a lot, you know what I mean?
It's
But
worth it.
you never know, and I would rather be
Mhm.
prepared, and it's there, it doesn't cost me I can now sleep better because it's already done. All I have to do, it's right above the vehicle, grab it, throw it in the back, grab the
Mhm.
kids, you're good to go, right?
Wow.
You just don't
Yeah.
wanna be in a situation and I also grew up in Southern California in, like, the '80s and the '90s, and we
Oh
had
yeah.
been rocked by some, like, really
Mhm.
serious earthquakes, like, I mean, ground opening earthquakes, and
Mm.
my dad was a first responder, so I saw firsthand, like, you need to be prepared. We had an earthquake kit, right? So, from the
Yeah.
time I was born, I was used to having something that, like, you literally grab and you need in the case of emergency. So, to me,
Okay.
it's super normal, but if you didn't grow up someplace that has natural disasters, maybe that sounds really
Mhm.
crazy to you.
Yeah, I grew up in North Carolina, so we had a hurricane kit
Mm.
back in Hurricane Fran in like I think it was '98 or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
We were on the bottom floor of our house. I'm the oldest of six. We were all on the bottom floor of our house, and we woke up. It was like 2 in the morning. We woke up in about 6 inches of water, and my youngest sister was face down in it. And so we like scrambled and got her up. She was fine, but like the house was flooding. So me and my mom went outside, and as the eye of Hurricane Fran came over our area of Raleigh, North Carolina, we went outside and with shovels and picks and we dug a trench because we were kind of at the bottom of the hill. We dug a trench to divert the water away from the house so it wouldn't keep on flooding. I'll never forget that. But yeah, I know what you mean when it comes to like when you got to get out, you don't have much time to react.
Mhm. Hol Yeah, so I'm in Wilmington, North
I
Carolina.
love
We've been here
Wilmington.
for a while.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but we
Yeah.
got rocked when was it? Maybe like 3 years ago, we had a pretty rough
Michael?
hurricane.
Was it
No.
Michael?
No, it wasn't Michael. What was it? Yeah, it was like 3 seasons ago because my oldest was born, and I remember I think it was a 3, and we were like, "Okay, we'll stay." Like, 3 is the question mark, right? It's like it's kinda like with blackjack, it's like whether or not you hit on 18, it's like your own thing,
Yeah.
and I feel like hurricanes are very similar, so some people, it's like 1 and 2, you absolutely just cruise through it, and then 3,
Yep.
it's like you have your own solid rule, it's like we either stay or we
Yep.
go. At the time that they said it was gonna be a 3, the eye wasn't supposed to go over us, but something had shifted and then it did. And then as you know, if that happens, you are getting rocked. Like you are in the worst place of it because that's like where it's the strongest. So our dog now has like permanent PTSD when it storms. Like he is a
Oh yeah.
giant German shepherd and you would never know. Like he is shaking. We have to medicate him anytime there's a storm because
Oh
he
my
stayed through
gosh.
that. I was terrified. So now I'm like 3 will probably leave now. We're going to probably like go up to Raleigh, stay at a hotel for a little bit. So I think it changed my stance on threes. But yeah, it goes back to if you're raised with these elements of that really have you come face to face with your lack of control over most things, all you can do is be prepared for what you can control. So rather than look like an idiot while in a John boat, like an inflatable John boat, and you're like,
Yeah.
trying to get to help, it's like, okay, now we have a plan. So I think
Yep.
that it's the same when it comes to your resources. It's like, it's have a
Mhm.
plan. And it might
Yep.
sound crazy to some people, like, well, my money is safe in my account. Well, that's absolutely not true, and you might think that this is only happening to super famous people or super controversial people, but I've
Hmm.
met I've met models that have had their accounts shut down, and not for breaking the law or anything like that. There's this loophole when it comes to legal businesses that banks have the right to not allow you to bank. So if you are in cannabis, CBD, sex work, anything like that, which is legal, like,
Hmm.
it's legal to have an OnlyFans account. But if you were to go to Bank of America and say, "Hey, all of my money is coming from OnlyFans and I'm getting naked
Hmm.
on there," they would probably say you need to figure out somewhere else to bank. So
Hmm.
this model was not even doing adult stuff. It was like burlesque, whatever. She had this stalker. The stalker was calling the banks and said that she was involved in sex work. She got denied the right to bank. So this is an
Wow.
average everyday person that happened in New York. We see what's happening right now with Russell Brand, and I promised that this would circle back. We see this British Parliament letter. So essentially, the British government is going out of their way to email the head of TikTok, the head of Rumble, the head of YouTube, these other platforms, and they're saying, hey, he's been accused of XYZ, just accused, right? Not legal, like no legal charges have been made, no police reports have been filed. These women went to a tabloid and are making accusations. So that looks a little bit suspicious as to like what are the motivations behind this. So again, simply an accusation with no proof and no police report. You now have the government with what seems to be a coordinated effort trying to shut down a citizen's livelihood, a citizen's right to speak. What
Hmm.
is now the public square, which is the internet, to
Hmm.
publish content and to have any kind of livelihood to support themselves or their family. So if that can happen, what do you do? Who do you think that these banks are gonna side with? We already see where all these social medias, except for Rumble is holding strong, and
Yeah.
they
Good
are
on them.
rock stars for
Yeah.
what they're doing, and they
Hmm.
reported their response, which is incredible. Like, they are truly men and people of integrity.
Hmm.
Like, they are absolutely walking the walk, but that is rare. So how do you protect yourself? And I think that this is where decentralized currency is crucial because you just never know, right? Is it
Yeah.
we go into a social credit score and now you're being monitored as a regular person for how much you're driving, what you're eating, what you're
Hmm.
tweeting, etc. So you should have your go bag, your financial go bag. And what is that? It's
Hmm.
going to be blockchain.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny because I could talk about this Russell Brand thing for an hour, but okay. So first of all, there is decentralized media coming up. There's decentralized social media coming up. There's a lot of that's fraught with problems because a fully decentralized, uncensored social media is hell. Like it's not good.
Hmm.
Um, but there needs to be there can be ways to distribute media in a decentralized fashion. There's a couple different crypto projects that will do that, and that's very, very encouraging. Again, kudos to Rumble for their response, saying you guys are out of line. If anyone, especially in the United States, is shocked about what is happening to Russell Brand, the United States legal system has been operating on a guilty until proven innocent for a long time. So you can literally have charges filed against you. You will be booked. You will have your picture taken. You'll serve jail time. And this is all before a trial has happened. You'll actually be put in jail and have to pay money to get out of jail. Doesn't matter if the charges are true or false. So this is not new. Okay, it's just new that it's happening to someone big like Russell Brand. But folks, especially men, I have secondhand experience with this. Secondhand experience. Men can be accused of a lot of things, and they will go to jail for a long, long time and wait their court date. And there was nothing there. The person who was accusing was lying. But it doesn't matter because they've been in jail. They can't pay their bills. They can't go to work. They've been financially ruined. Their entire just the narrative that's been put out, your mugshot has ruined your reputation. So this is all happening to Russell Brand right now. It's a coordinated effort, obviously. I don't think anyone on with you and I have a very, very similar political ideology, but this is pretty coordinated because of what Russell's been standing for the past 4 years, especially. And yeah, we're going to have to embrace the systems that have the least amount of centralized control. And like this is this is money and this is power, and this is not being done by just some politicians who are on a power trip, there are levers above them that are being pulled. There's a deep state in the United States and there's a deep state in Britain. And so they're all coming down on Russell Brand right now in order to silence him. And we got to support him.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was watching it was, one of the guys from Trigonometry. I don't know if it was Constantine or
Great
Francis.
show. Great show.
Uh, they said I didn't watch that Russell Brand thing. I want to. It's on my list, but he was pointing out because everyone goes really quick to say it's the left that's censoring because that's kind of what has been
Mm-hmm.
happening, over the
Mm-hmm.
last few years. Before that, it was the right, but currently it's been the left. He's like, right now, the British Parliament is pretty much conservative. Like, it's a conservative majority. So no, you can't vote your way out of censorship, which I thought was really interesting because we do have this idea that like someone's going to be our savior. One politician is going to be our savior. And I think that that's fundamentally flawed because almost everyone can be bought. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why right now, and it's a little bit off topic, but that's why I currently am a really big fan of RFK. He just seems like the only
Mm-hmm.
one that's running right now that
Yep.
seems incorruptible. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, because
maybe
he's
I'm
like a
wrong.
child of the beast. He's a child of the beast. I do want to push back on that one point that trigonometry brought up about the British Parliament being run by conservatives.
Yeah.
A British like the Conservative Party in Britain is more left than the Democrats in the United States.
Oh,
It's
really?
just oh yeah, it's just a label. Like in no way is the conservative British party an actual like what you would think is like a GOP Mitch McConnell conservative. We're talking about two different things. There's a language barrier there almost. So if anything, like Nigel Farage is a conservative, but they think he's a fringe because he's kind of like a Ted Cruz here. But most of the conservative leadership there is not conservative. They're very much top-down socialists, very much liberal in their ideology, not very faith-based at all. What you could think of as like a mainline conservative here, right? Bible thumper doesn't happen there. So just want to make sure like we get our terms right. But yeah, just like, but even still, once the political parties in power, like right now, the Republicans here in the United States, they're like very pro Bitcoin. They're very pro cryptocurrency. Guys, we love this. We love this. Well, guess what? As soon as they get in power, what are they going to start hating on? Bitcoin and
Mm,
cryptocurrency, right? Because they need that as a narrative against the left. When the left is using this as they're being told by the banks because they're in power, hey, you gotta cut this Bitcoin shit out. Um, the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States, they are two wings on the same bird. You're
mhm,
not going to get change if you're just looking at like a blue and a red thing. I love this thing that I saw the other day. It's not red versus blue, it's the state versus you. The bigger
mhm,
that the government is, the more they're going to impose themselves on it, whether they dress it up with trans flags and diversity or with the Christian flag and Bibles. If it's the state and if it's a government and they have a ton of control, they're going to force that control down on you. The only safe government is one that is in fear of its people. So that's where I'm at as far as politically and what we're looking at in the landscape. Like it's not good. Don't look to the right to be your savior. Don't look at a person to be your savior. If you're looking for one person, especially a politician, the only reason they're running for office is because they want power. Sorry. I will say your point about RFK. RFK is like, he's kind of like the Daryl Dixon of politics. If you watch Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon is the guy with the crossbow. He's just there to survive. His whole family's been wiped out. And RFK literally has had his family wiped out by the government. And he's there to, I think, right the wrongs. I don't trust any politician, but I was there in Bitcoin Miami this year and I heard him speak at a small party there. He understands the stakes. I think he's the only candidate that understands the stakes. You can have a candidate say, I'm going to drain the swamp, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
mhm.
RFK knows that we're not talking about a swamp, we're talking about an Everglade. And he's the only one that understands the stakes of what he's actually getting into.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with that. He seems like he has like a real sense of contribution and a mission and to right a lot of wrongs and to really get into these alphabet agencies and
Yep.
really fundamentally change them. And I know that Vivek is also saying the same thing. And I do think he does a really good job on his like his tour. Is that what you call it, like a
Mm-hmm.
tour?
Yep.
And he's super smart, obviously, but
Hmm.
I still feel like I'm listening to a politician.
He is the TED Talk of the conservative politicians. So he's just a walking TED Talk. I like what he says. He says cool stuff. Does he understand the depths of the challenge that he's facing? 100% no. He does not.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and, I mean, he's definitely I think he's probably my favorite candidate going for the right, but,
Hmm.
I still am leaning towards RFK, and it's so funny because, one of the moms in in my son's group, it's like the gossip starts so early. Like, it starts so early, and it's, like, not about what you would think the gossip is about, it's about politics, and she was going around calling me a Trumper, and I was like, "What does first of all, what does that mean?" Second of all, I'm looking at RFK right now. If I was a Trumper, I
Hmm.
would be like, Trump is the only person that can save us, right? It's
Yep.
pr President Donald Trump forever. I'm like, "That's not even accurate." And then why would you like, what
Hmm.
is the basis of you calling me this, and why are you saying it like a pejorative? It's just like you
Yeah.
take something and you try to reduce it down as to like this simple thing that you can put into a bucket because your brain is so lazy, and it was really frustrating for me. Like, you don't even know me, and you're saying that. You have
Yeah.
no idea what I stand for, what I'm looking for in a candidate, what's important to me and my family in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really frustrating. Just that example of tribalism, like it's just unhinged from reality. You're just kind of saying it as a cudgel to shut people up, to shut down discourse, and like as far as I can tell, being a Trumper, you could qualify if you're just like, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't get like 5 boosters. Maybe we should only get like one. And then if you like question that, you're a Trumper. You're just like a MAGA, like go to the Proud Boy rally, might as well, because if you're not towing the line, then you're a Trumper. Um,
Mhm.
and that's indicative. That kind of orthodoxy is indicative of a cult. So I would say, like, it's my position that the fringe left, the one that's kind of in control of most of the media and most of the corporations, it's a cult because they don't have any critical thinking capability. Whereas you get more towards like the middle left and like even like the middle conservatives, it's like, yeah, we're going to question ourselves. And if there's new data, then I change my position because that's what smart people do. But if it's like, if there's new data for someone who's like a hardcore I'm not even calling a liberal. They're progressive. Like they're
Mhm.
liberals, like believe in free speech, whereas progressives, wasn't it just the Jacinda, what's her face, the former uh, prime minister of New Zealand said we have to have censorship in order to protect free speech. Like, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, that's
Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to
bananas.
swear. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
We are censorship free here. I had Peter McCullough on last week, so,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I'll go wherever, you know what I mean? I will
Okay.
talk to whoever, and anything is allowed to be said on this podcast. It's like when you think about what was the agency, I'm blanking right now, is the, ADL or the
Yep.
yeah.
Anti Defamation League.
No, maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Basically, like they are an organization that is supposed to pride themselves in free speech, and is
Hmm.
that's the right one? Yeah, they would defend people that were denying the Holocaust, and they would defend people that were like basically Nazis. And there was it wasn't that they agreed with what they were saying, obviously, but it was like it
That's
is
the
so
ACLU. ACLU.
ACLU, yeah.
Yep.
It is so important for people to be able to have free speech because the moment that you start bringing that in, it's
Hmm.
just going to be flipped on you when the regime changes. Now they obviously are
Hmm.
not the same as they used to be, but that used to be the foundation of what they believed, and some people still
Yeah.
believe that. But it's like if you think that just because people are silencing what you don't want to hear right now, and that's okay, eventually someone's not going to like what you have to say, and it's definitely going to be
Hmm.
flipped on you. So you just have to have the rules that you would want, not just for you, but like if your enemy was in charge or if your opponent was in charge, that you would want the same
Yeah.
rules.
Exactly. And it's like goes back to that question of who watches the watchman, like who is deciding what is right and what is wrong. If the arbiter is a couple people in a room, well, they're going to be influenced pretty easily. But if it's a law where it's open ended and people can feel threatened but not be in danger, then it's more free. Like if you people who will willingly give up freedom for safety deserve neither.
I love
I don't
that
know who
quote.
said that. I don't know
I
who
think it
said. I
was
think it was
Ben Franklin, I think.
You can attribute any good quote to Ben Franklin and it'll sound right.
Yeah, it's true, it's true. It's like him, Mark Twain, and
Yeah.
Einstein get misquoted the
Yeah.
most, but it sounds right, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And like nothing could be more true than like, gosh, is that not the motto ever since 2020 of like our society? It's
Mhm.
crazy. It's
It really
crazy.
is, but you seem pretty bold and brave with your, I don't know, your Twitter. Like you enter into the gender ideology, the church of gender, if you will.
I do.
And that's a
Yeah.
scary place to be because the feedback you get there is pretty wild. And do you have kids or do you not have kids?
I do. I have 2 kids. They're both under the age of 2.
Okay, so that's why you're in there. I was like,
Well,
you're usually a parent.
yeah. Yeah. It's and like so I have a background in Hollywood. Like I spent 10 years, I'm still there, but I'm in the Writers Guild of America. And I was quiet on my political beliefs just to play ball because as you probably know, like Hollywood breeds a lot of insecurity. And if you speak out, you're like sacrificing your ability to get your next gig or whatever. But eventually, like it got to a point to where I was tracking this stuff with this gender indoctrination, and it got to a point to where I'm sitting back and I saw the logo that the abolitionists had on like a coin, and it had a picture of an African American man in chains, and he was like pleading, and it's around the coin. It said, "Am I not a friend and a brother?" And I thought to myself, like these people, abolitionists, like stood up. They believed in something bigger than themselves, and they went down in history fighting for what's right. And I saw what was happening to kids, and then I saw kids show up in my life, and I saw how innocent and malleable and just beautiful that they are. And I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm making a stand on this. Like people are going to know me for a couple things. They're going to know me for having curly hair, for being a crypto guy, and for this gender stuff. And like I put my money where my mouth is, and I talked to people on both sides. I was down in I was in downtown Atlanta in Pride Square holding a sign that said "No child is born in the wrong body," all during Pride, every Saturday during Pride Month. And I had a lot of great conversations with that. I got a lot of hate, but I got a shockingly amount of really good positive feedback. And the biggest takeaway I got, number one, was just the cowardice of people and how they just will not speak against this. They said, "I love what you're doing." I said, "Well, come here and stand with me for 5 minutes, talk to these people." And they said, "No, I can't do that." Like it literally takes 5 minutes out of your day, and you're not going to stand up for a 14-year-old girl being maimed for the rest of her life. You can't take 5 minutes out of your day to stand against that.
Mhm.
And then secondly, this girl who was about 11 years old, she was there. I was out in front of a brunch spot and she was there with her parents, and she was looking at my sign, and she came up and she talked to me and she said, "Do you hate trans people?" And I said, "I'm standing on this corner because I'm trying to let kids just grow up." And she said, "Well, what's wrong with trans people?" I said, "There's nothing wrong with trans people, but just like you probably should not get a tattoo until you understand the gravity of that decision, you should not maim yourself. You shouldn't hurt yourself. If I saw you right now cutting your wrists, I would say you're hurting yourself. The same thing is happening to kids all around you." And I had to like square up with my beliefs and talk to this 12-year-old who was genuinely concerned about if I was like some type of like bigot on the street. I was just concerned. And I like, if you don't make a stand, like, what do you stand for? If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So I kind of feel like I'm rambling right now just because this is like really close to my heart, not just because of like, I'm trying to protect my son. And I'm sure you're familiar with what's happening with in California with AB 967, how they took away the parental rights. If you do
Mhm.
not affirm the gender identity of your child can be taken away. But it's also like if you go into the D-trans subreddit community, the pain and the anguish is just so palpable, and it's like there's no bottom. There's these 20-year-olds, there's these 18-year-olds, there's these 30-year-olds who are saying, "I made changes to my body when I was young," or "I just made changes to my body and I hate myself and I want to die." And all of this is fixable. Like all of this was avoidable
Mhm.
because there's manipulation happening to these kids. And
Mhm.
I don't like bullies. So yeah, there's been a cost to my professional career. I've lost friends over it, but when it comes to these conversations, like I really like what Billboard Chris is doing, and I'm a part of Gays Against Groomers. When it comes to these conversations, you have to really call out the evil, but then you have to be gracious to the people who are struggling with gender dysmorphia, because it is a big time struggle that they're dealing with, and they need grace and they need support. But the people, the administrators, and the politicians who are using this for political gain, they deserve withering criticism, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then people also fail to recognize that it's now this emerging industry, right? Like the whole
Yeah,
transitioning of a child is worth
yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So follow the money always,
Hmm.
especially if you're trying to do like the integrity test. But it's interesting because it's like only one group of people is allowed to voice their opinion and their story and their quote truth.
Hmm.
But then when you listen to the detransitioners, they get shut down. Like no one gives them space to
Immediately.
talk. They try to attack their credibility, and then ironically, they'll attack their mental health. And they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, well, they're crazy then." And it's like, well, you both had a mental disorder. One of you just approached it differently, or came to, or it was like it's just different, right? And it's interesting that they get dismissed so easily when they're suffering so immensely, and it is, as Abigail Schreier would say, irreversible
Hmm.
damage.
Yep. Yep.
So
I
I
read
would
that
say,
book. Yep.
yeah, listen to those people,
Yep.
right? It's like a cautionary tale. Like, know the full scope of the situation. You can't just look at one side of the argument and say, okay, that's the capital T truth. And then there's this whole other part of the equation that you're consciously choosing to like put under the rug. And it's like, well, why are you doing that? There's got to be some kind of motivating factor there. And again, when it comes to like the age of consent and what California is doing, it's like first they moved the age of consent to for medical consent to 12, and then they passed that law, that 10-year gap law, so you could have a 12-year-old with a 22-year-old. That's fucking insane. And it was like Senator Scott Wiener, I wanna say, is like the
Hmm.
person that, like, wrote and helped pass the bill, and if you just look at
He
his
did.
social media, that's a little bit concerning.
Yep.
But yeah, like, in that new did that bill pass, the one that said basically if you don't affirm your child's gender identity that you can lose them, or is that just being brought to the floor?
Oh no, it passed both the House and the Assembly. It is waiting for Gavin Newsom's signature, and he's pretty much going to sign it unless there's some type of act of God.
Mm. So then what do you do as a parent? You know what I mean? Unless you are completely bought and sold on the idea that your child knows best, which any parent that thinks that is insane. Like it's not to say that children aren't immensely intelligent and compassionate, and that they don't
Hmm.
have knowledge that us as adults have either forgotten or don't know, right? Like I learn from my
Yep.
child on a daily basis.
Hmm.
That's different than me saying everything that he feels I need to validate. Like if it was up to
Hmm.
him, he would live off of birthday cake pops from Starbucks. Like that is the only thing
Hmm.
that he would eat. So I
Yep.
can't be like, well, that's how you feel. Or the other day he was saying, I don't know, like what did he want to pretend? I don't know. Kids pretend to be dinosaurs or they pretend to be dogs and they want to like, you're not. We can pretend to be this thing, but we're not this other thing. So yeah, unless you're like fully bought and sold on the idea that your kid knows best no matter what, do you leave California as a parent? Because all of those things that we had just mentioned, like medical
Hmm.
consent being 12, what if you have someone that's on the spectrum? Let's say you have a
Hmm.
12-year-old on the spectrum, and a vast majority of children that have autism, they're nonverbal, they might be super
Hmm.
violent, they might need a ton of medication, they might need to go to see a specialist. If all of a sudden they decide they don't want to do any of that because they are struggling now, and I saw a mom, and this was her actual story. She's trying to force medication on them. They can take the kid. So then she had to take her son and give the son to the father that lived in, the Midwest because they had different laws there, went back on the medication and the son was fine. So like what do you do? Do you leave? Because that's a huge gamble. It's like my kids aren't mine to take care of, they're the states. That's essentially what California is saying.
Yeah, and that is a straight up pull, direct quote from Marxists, from Marx. So, like, it is full blown Marxism when it comes to gender stuff and a bunch of other things in California. But look, if people make decisions on where they buy their house based on the school district, because you value your education for your children, if you value your ability to parent, you must move out of California. There's no way, because here's the thing, they're not going to stop. Okay. The
Mm-hmm.
left, I would say, I won't even say the left, the progressives over the past 20 years have gotten all their policies enacted, especially when it comes to gender, by continuously gaslighting the public into here's how it goes. They make one little step, and then people on the right say, hey, this is a big deal. This could be a huge problem. We got to stop. And the left says, no, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting. You're blowing this out of proportion. And then a couple of months go by, and they take another inch. Same reaction. No. Another inch. They have done that over the past 20 years to now where we're in this situation to where Anthony Weiner is literally going to take your kids, your son, and cut off his dick and pump him and basically make him a slave to pharmaceutical companies for the rest of his life. By the way, P.S. I believe it's 85 to 97% of boys who start testosterone in, I think, Tanner stage 2 or later cannot have an orgasm later in life. It is impossible for them to have an orgasm.
As
And that's without
testosterone or
surgery.
estrogen?
Estrogen. Yeah.
Estrogen.
Estrogen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's both because you have to like cancel each other out, but it's mostly estrogen. If you go on hormone therapy, right? The
Mhm.
reversible puberty blockers, the reversible hormones, none of that shit's fucking reversible. Okay.
Mhm.
That's all just PR. If you do that
Mhm.
to a boy, they cannot have an orgasm later in life. It's the same thing for women. I don't think the percentage is as high, but it's still well over 50%. So if you can't have that like spiritual connection with your partner, like what have you just signed that kid up for the rest of their lives? Let alone all of the reproductive problems, the fucking osteoporosis they get, early onset osteoporosis in their 20s when you start puberty blockers, because none of them are reversible. So if you're a parent and you're in California and you value your children or you're thinking about becoming a parent, you have to move to a state that has parental reality. It's
Mhm.
like that's just it. Like you can't. These blue cities are. It's going to be a wasteland. Like there's no other way to put it. So it's unfortunate, but yeah, if you're in California and you're a parent or you want to be a parent, you got to get out.
Yeah, we have I still have some family out there, and we have some really close friends that live in Southern California, and one of them was trying to get us to move there. Two of them are basically butted up against each other, and then there's like a lot right next door, and they're like, we could be our own little. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not. You are out of your mind. This is literally the last state I would ever move to. It's beautiful. The weather is beautiful. The scenery is beautiful. Geography is like the geographic nature of
Mm-hmm.
California is beautiful, but like the policies and the people and the mindset and just like that collective energy is destructive, and there's no other way to put it. And it sucks. It
It
sucks, but I
does
feel like
suck.
it's too far gone. Like you can't have where do you even go? And then I mean, all of the policies, but even with like the homelessness issue, it's you can't go any where I used to live in California, you can't even go. The sidewalks are taken up. You're like, this doesn't feel safe. This is not a place for anyone that is like a law abiding, tax paying citizen. Like you come last in this place. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how California has devolved into this like Hunger Games, District 1, District 13 type of situation. It's I would say it's bizarre, but there's another famous quote by probably Mark Twain. Let's just go ahead and say it's Mark Twain. People get the government that they vote for. So people voted for this, like, so Candace, I want to ask you, like, are you going to send your kids to public school or are you going to homeschool or do private school?
So right now my son's in like a private Montessori, and it's
Okay.
good for now, but
Hmm.
they're like we have meetings with the head of school all of the time because there's so much that I don't agree with, and I'm just like the days that they have a diversity, equity, inclusion teacher and program. So I'm like the
Hmm.
day that she comes in, he's just not going to school. She comes in like once a month, and I pull him, I talk to his teachers. I'm like, this is going to be a class discussion, he's not to be involved in it, and I'll
Wow.
come pick him up, right? Like I don't
Hmm.
want anything on like certain topics around him. And the way I described it to her, because I don't know where anyone leans, right? And I go into
Hmm.
this as myself. Like I'm not gonna tone myself down or make any room for misinterpretation. Like, so I go in as mama bear, and I'm like, this is my stance, this is my family's values and principles, and they're not to be treaded on. And I brought up specifically like the gender stuff because there's some books that they have for the older kids, and I'm like, so who knows if they're trying to sneak them into the younger kids? It's just not going to be discussed. And anyone who prematurely takes away innocence from a child is nothing short of evil in my mind.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
that's whether you are introducing concepts of violence too soon, concepts of racism too soon, concepts of sex and gender too soon.
Yeah.
They exist in such a pure space, and it's so unsullied. Like, it is like the closest to God I think that we can ever really experience as a young child. It
Absolutely.
is just
Absolutely.
incredible. And if you
Yep.
as an adult go in and rip that away because you are hurting and you have some kind of fucking hole in you,
Mhm.
it's nothing shy of evil. So if you do that to my kid, there's going to be a fucking hurricane that you're going to deal with.
Mhm.
So I let that be known. So for now, he's good. I trust the people that he's with, the adults that he's with, but I know that's not going to be the case moving forward. So we are definitely are gonna we're trying to start either a pod or like a franchise, and if that doesn't work, it'll just be traditional homeschooling with,
Okay.
maybe like a Socratic method. But there's a couple franchise schools that we're trying to bring to Wilmington. It's just hard
Mhm.
because it's super rare to find someone who A is like super into their kids' education, that they
Yep.
have their hand on the pulse. A lot of people just send their kids to basically a glorified daycare and just
Mhm.
assume that the adults know best that are there. And then it's another type of parent that is willing to take a quote risk and invest in an alt school because
Mm.
I mean, it takes like an entrepreneur, essentially, someone who's
Yeah.
not crazy risk averse, and they actually see it as less of a risk doing it yourself versus handing that off to someone that you don't know. So I would say
Mhm.
putting your kids in public school is way riskier than you trying to do something alt, whether it's Waldorf or Montessori or Socratic.
Mhm.
Like, those are way safer in my mind. Even just homeschooling is way safer in my mind than throwing them in the public school. I mean, we know it's not serving us, it's failing kids left and right. We can't get
Mhm.
them to have jobs. They don't know what their purpose is. They don't even know what their interest or curiosity is because that has
Yep.
been like hammered out of them since you put them there.
Mhm.
How dare you be curious? How dare you ask questions? This is the only way to answer and solve a problem. So
Yep.
it's like, what kind of mindset and like vitality do you want your kid to have going into adulthood? So again, like, it's assessing risks, and for some reason we've lost our sovereignty, we've lost faith and conviction in ourselves, and we're handing that off by proxy to someone else with no proof. So it's like finding your own power again, I think, is the answer to a lot of these problems.
Yeah, it's gosh, I could literally talk about this for like 4 hours straight with you. This is a fantastic conversation. I love this so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm the oldest of 6 and I was actually homeschooled. So shout out to my mom and my dad who co homeschooled me. It's the public school system was the current system was invented by a Marxist, and it was put together to make workers. It was
Mhm.
not put together to make innovators and to make artists. It was there to make people who work 9 to 5 and didn't ask questions and do what they were told. I mean, your whole existence is when you're in school is based on bells. Bell for this, oh, get up and move. Bell for this, get up and move. Take test, obey, blah, 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 blah. Also, like if you are good at taking tests, that does not mean you understand the material. It just means you're good at taking tests. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, I'm gonna move my kids. Right now, they go to like a daycare slash school thing. We're probably gonna end up homeschooling and doing like a co-op
Mhm.
because that's a lot more refined these days. There are a couple. If you don't know him already, Hotep Jesus, he's really big on uh, homeschool franchises. So if you want to have him on, he could talk about that at length.
Oh, wow, I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm part of his like boys club called Men of Order. We talk about homeschooling kids and guns and all that kind of stuff all the time. But yeah, he's very big into like raise your daughters, raise your sons outside of the school system. Here's the resources, XYZ. So yeah, really big into that. I can make that connect if you want to.
That'd be awesome,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. So yeah, I mean the school system is trash, and it's really encouraging to hear that you are not participating in that.
No, no way. I'm not meant to conform. All my decisions up to now are prime examples of that, so I can't break that habit and just have my children fall in line. That's not gonna
The
work.
die has been cast for Candace.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I had a horrible school experience. Like, we
Hmm.
moved around a lot. I was always the new girl. I got picked on relentlessly. I actually got bullied so bad, physically bullied so bad that my mom had to pull me out for a year,
Oh wow.
and she quote homeschooled me, but really all she did was
Hmm.
let me walk around Barnes and Noble and just like pick out books that I liked to read, and
Amazing.
that was basically my homeschool for a whole year. But I guess just based off, and my husband had a pretty equally horrible experience. He has ADD, and it was really, really bad when he was younger. Severe test, like, taking, I wouldn't say anxiety, but just, like, he couldn't perform taking tests. They literally put him in the basement at this school, and that's where he learned. So it just gives you all these labels and kind of puts a ceiling on what you think your potential is. So you see that this life force is getting sucked out of what is like such a beautiful young person, and that's the last thing I want to ever happen to my children. So if I can try to facilitate an environment that's encouraging and lets them explore and doesn't like perpetuate all these things with society that I think are so fundamentally flawed, then I like that's my duty as a parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
Mhm.
Totally.
Oh man, so we've covered a lot of things. We started with Bitcoin and blockchain, but I mean, hopefully the listeners can connect the dots and kind of see the overarching theme of this conversation is sovereignty, taking your power back, being prepared, not paranoid, and this goes into all areas of your life. So it's what sections of your life are you asleep and kind of just walking through, and what needs
Mm-hmm.
to maybe be revisited and maybe needs a little bit more love, attention, and care to be able to I don't know, just so you have your hand on the pulse of all areas, right? Like you just know what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So
You have to be aware. You just can't be asleep. You can't just
mhm,
be a media junkie floating through life. Like, is your rudder down in the water or not? Like, make that choice.
mhm. Amen to that. Well, Nick, this was incredible. Thank you for sticking out the
Yeah.
technical difficulties. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that we did because this was a really great conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before we take off, do you want to tell the listeners where they can follow you, how they can
Hmm.
support you, projects you're working on? And I'll make sure that we have the editors link everything below.
Yeah. Before I do that, I want to do a quick plug for Candice. If you're watching this video, hit the like button, subscribe to her channel, follow her on Twitter. Like, guys, it's not that hard. She's out here every day providing amazing content. Okay, so that's my show for Candice. Okay,
Thank you.
because she's awesome. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm just at Nick Dimondi. My name will be in the description, probably in the title. I work for Hid Network. We're a cryptocurrency YouTube streaming platform. We've got a bunch of channels, Discover Crypto around the blockchain basement. So you can give us a follow there. But like, I don't have any like personal projects that I'm really big into right now. Like, I would say if you want to get involved in something that I care about, get involved with Gays Against Groomers, and then also get involved with this fund that I work with called Operation Resolute, which helps special forces military members get mental health support and also gives mental health support to their families. So I don't get any money from them. I don't get any kickbacks. It's just a charity that I like. Operation Resolute. Go ahead and check them out. And appreciate it again, Candice, for having me on.
Oh my gosh, anytime, anytime.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I love that you plug a charity. That's amazing. And we'll have to do this again.
yeah, for sure. I appreciate it.
And that's it for this week's episode of Chatting with Candice. Before you go, if you could just leave that 5-star review, if you haven't done it yet or it's been a while, you can do it more than once. That also helps feed the machine. Support our guest by giving him a follow. I'll make sure that I link his resources below as well. And if you enjoyed this episode and know someone else that might, please share it. Word of mouth is the best way to grow a show. And yeah, I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.